Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And our topic for tonight is the unit analyzed. And last week, I talked about a post from Pepe Escobar that dealt with the proposal for a new international trading currency that was advanced by the Unit Foundation. The Unit Foundation has a white paper out, and that white paper explains what the unit is and tries to argue for it. So let me see. So far, I don't seem to have anybody watching this stream, which is very strange. Let me make sure I share this on Facebook. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Okay, see if that brings a few people over. I guess I'm just going to start explaining the unit. I'll start going through the white paper. I'm sharing a version of it which had some comments of mine. So the paper was written by Alexei Sobotin and G. Luo. And it was a paper recommended by Pepe Escobar, the well-known reporter and traveler and commenter on the transitions going on in the international system. So, I'm going to read through an abstract of this white paper, which makes a number of points. The unit fractal monetary ecosystem introduces a practical approach to creating, quote, apolitical money, unquote. It can be freely used as a storage of value or currency for payments via any open payment and clearing system, while providing long-term purchasing power stability. The unit ecosystem is proposed as a solution to the basic lack of trust problem stemming from the politicization of the use of a single global currency for trading and constraints on its use for valuation and settlement of trade and capital flows. So, is there really a basic lack of trust? Well, more and more countries are no longer using the dollar to trade with as an international currency for trade. More and more of them are relying on their local currencies, and they're using local currencies for trading with one another. They perceive that there's a political problem of trust. Okay, that's been exacerbated by actions of the United States. For example, the United States freezing and seizing the gold, of Venezuela, or at least causing it to be frozen. It was actually in the UK, the gold was, and at the request of the United States, the gold was frozen. And my memory's a little hazy on this. I think a part of it was actually turned over to Juan Guaido, the pretender to the presidency, of Venezuela. And of course, there was a recent effort by the United States to take $300 billion in Russian reserves, in dollars, and legislation in the U.S. Congress allowing the U.S. To appropriate those dollars and to turn them over to Ukraine for use in the war effort over there. I don't think that's quite been done yet, but Biden has been given the authority by the Congress, to do that. So the point is, stores of currency or stores of gold are being frozen as power moves in international relations. And stores of money are being seized. And this is being done by the collective West in pursuing its goals in international relations, giving rise to anxiety among the governments of the third world nations, the global South governments, that they too could be victimized by the United States if they continue to conduct their international trade using the US dollar. So this is what's perceived as a problem, and the unit ecosystem for trading is proposed as a solution to the basic lack of trust problem. I don't think it's false to say there's a trust problem. The issue is whether the unit ecosystem proposed as a solution to this problem is really a solution and would really deliver on the promises it makes. So let's go further into the promises it's making. We introduce the fractal monetary framework, which allows global financial system to function without directly using any national currencies for international trade and reserves. The unit is designed to serve as a convenient and stable global currency alternative within the existing financial infrastructure. It is also expected to be more resilient than any national currency to political exigencies of the day. So these are intentions. The unit is designed to serve. The question is whether it's likely to, given its design. Now, it has a fractal design, and it claims that the fractal design ensures that the composition of each unit token's basket of underlying assets or reserve basket is invariant across the nodes of the network as it scales. What's a network? It's the trading network that's using the unit ecological system. The intrinsic value of each unit token always remains proportional to the total value of the unit reserve basket measured in gold. So the value of the reserve basket is measured, in gold. Not that the reserve basket is convertible to gold, but the value is measured in gold and is expected to remain less volatile than the value of any of the components of the basket. So there's a market basket, and it's partly composed of gold, and it's partly composed of other currencies. As we shall see, they are fiat currencies. Next, the unit token is not a cryptocurrency, since the intrinsic value of each unit token is linked to a basket of underlying assets. And this is not true in the case of cryptocurrencies, where there are no underlying assets. Anyway, the basket of underlying assets includes 40% the gold. At the same time, the unit token is not a stable coin, since its value is not directly derived from the basket of underlying assets, and by design, there is no mechanism for reverse conversion of the unit into the basket of underlying assets. After an initial period, the market value of unit tokens is expected to become primarily a function of supply and demand, not of the value of the underlying basket. I have to ask the question here, but can this happen as long as the value of the underlying basket is based on the value, of gold? Won't it then always be a function of the market value of gold instead of the market value of the underlying the currencies, or the market value of some set of underlying currencies or underlying assets? That's a question that has to be asked. Further, new unit tokens can be emitted or minted, quote unquote, the terms used interchangeably in this document, at unit nodes. What is a unit node, in the system? I think a unit node is any party that's using the unit parties that are using the unit have the right to emit new tokens, essentially new tokens of currency. Anyway, these can be emitted at the unit nodes in exchange for depositing assets corresponding to the current value of the unit reserve basket, as that value is measured in gold. So in other words, when you deposit assets somewhere, in a depository, 40% of those assets have to be gold, and all the others have to derive their current value as that current value is measured, in gold. Minting, the process of minting is decentralized and is performed according to the unit governance rulebook in the absence of constant coordination among issuers of the underlying currencies. The integrity of the unit ecosystem is preserved by blockchain-based node synchronization and elimination of the need to rebalance gold holdings between unit nodes, thus minimizing costs and risks. Unit tokens are not subject to any capital controls or manipulation of the price. They can be freely bought and sold or used as currency for payments via any open payment and clearing system. I have to say a little bit about what that means. When people are trading, in gold, in gold, they often make use of gold depositories physically located in certain places. And gold is often transferred to and from those places that have substantial gold holdings and that are trusted sites for the holding, of gold. The unit ecosystem is going to eliminate the need to rebalance gold holdings between and among, the unit but nodes. And so the transportation costs of gold are going to be eliminated by the unit system. In addition to the intended use of the unit as a currency for traditional and alternative payment systems, resilience of the unit ecosystem is further enhanced by a secure proprietary unit payment protocol designed to transact with unit tokens, which will be open for access in line with the unit rulebook. Haven't read the rulebook yet, so I don't know exactly what it says. Further development of the unit ecosystem foresees launch of new elements with additional functionality. In other words, it's envisioned that the original nodes in the system are likely to be nations, such as the BRICS nations, and their banking systems. But it's expected that new elements will be launched, including mercantile and capital stock exchanges, where commodities and financial instruments will be priced and settled in unit tokens. It is expected that issuance of financial instruments denominated in the unit will follow in due course and will enable the use of the unit for storage of value, investment, and reserves. In other words, securities, bonds, of various kinds. Now we move, that was the abstract. You might wonder at the abstract. You can think about the abstract a lot. The abstract has implications, but it calls for further detail. So let's get into the detail. In this document, we introduce the unit fractal monetary ecosystem that offers unique benefits to all participants. The unit ecosystem aims to provide a convenient global currency alternative which will be resilient to political interference and will continue to function in the absence of full consensus and constant coordination among the ecosystem participants. UNIT enhances sovereignty of individual states who no longer need to rely on other countries' domestic currencies for trade and foreign exchange reserves and can pursue independent domestic monetary policies focused on growth and price stability while retaining complete exchange rate and interest rate control. Now, that's a paragraph that's very significant when looked at but from an MMT point of view, because from the MMT point of view, there are many states right now, far from all states, but there are many states that are characterized by monetary sovereignty. And those states no longer rely on other countries' domestic currencies for trade and foreign exchange reserves. And they do pursue independent domestic monetary policies. They may or may not be focused on growth and price stability. Those are two goals that issuing currencies might have. Also, monetary sovereigns do retain complete exchange rate and interest rate control, certainly interest rate control. If they're monetary sovereigns, they allow their currencies to float, on international exchanges, and they don't need exchange rate control beyond that. So for those nations that are monetary sovereigns now, the question has to be asked, how can their sovereignty be enhanced by adopting the unit rather than their local currencies? What are examples of nations that have sovereign currencies right now? Well, the United States is one such nation. The UK is another. Canada is a third. Japan is a fourth. Australia is a fifth. New Zealand, is a sixth. Also, China is very close to having monetary sovereignty. All it needs to create monetary sovereignty for itself is to cease pegging the value of the renminbi to the dollar. They voluntarily do that because they thought it somehow gave them an advantage, in international trade. But as soon as they decide that is not in their interest, they can become a fully monetarily sovereign country. And they wouldn't have to go into the unit in order to try to enhance their sovereignty. Why would their unit enhance their sovereignty? They're going into the unit system, enhance their sovereignty as compared with they're simply allowing the value of the renminbi to float, in international trade. Why would joining the unit give them greater sovereignty when their use of the unit for international trade would be tied in some way to the value of gold. Then they're subject to variations in the value of gold. Why would China want to be subject to such variations? Why would Russia? I'm not up on current facts of Russia, whether they still owe money to other nations in currencies they don't issue. But I don't think Russia pegs the value of its ruble to other currencies right now. I think they allow the value of the ruble to float on international exchanges. And Russia today, if they don't owe I almost said if they don't owe dollars in currencies not their own, but the point being, of course, okay, if they do not owe money in currencies they do not issue at this point, then Russia is probably a fully monetary sovereign nation also. Now, of course, the nations of Europe that are members of the Eurozone are not fully sovereign because they no longer they've given up their domestic currencies to the euro. And they use the euro both for international trade and also for domestic exchanges, okay, as well. So they're not sovereign, okay, in their own currencies. How many nations are in the Eurozone now? Is it 26? Something like that. That's a lot of nations that have given up control, okay, of their currency. They thought that was a good deal, that it would enhance trade among the nations of Europe and be of benefit to all. Of course, it's been a problem because they were limited in their policy space to respond to the crash of 2008, okay, in the following years. And they had severe recessions, okay, in a number of nations as a result of that, very high unemployment rates because they were not monetary sovereigns, because they had become members of the Eurozone and because they were restricted in running deficits, which would have allowed them to compensate for the recessions in their countries, which in many of the Euro countries went beyond recession into depression. Those countries included Portugal, Ireland, also Italy, Greece, and Spain, and very famously Greece, but also extremely high youth unemployment rates in Spain, in Ireland, in Italy, okay, in Portugal. Things were not going very well in Germany and France either, though their unemployment rates were not as high, okay, as the other nations. Let's imagine an alternative world where the Eurozone were to break up and the Europeans were to join the unit ecosystem, which would allow them Uh, okay, I'm sorry, Bonnie. Why are you saying uh-oh? She's not talking at this point. So, if they then want to enter the unit ecosystem, they would then be tying the value of their currencies and literally the amount of currency they could issue to the value and availability of gold. Remember, 40% of the basket underlying the value of currency assets would be in gold. So they would be constraining their own currency issuance for purposes of international trade. Now, they wouldn't be using the unit for domestic purposes. So if they were no longer inside of the Eurozone, they would have an improvement in their situation because they would be issuing their own currencies for domestic use and they wouldn't have the constraints that they have now. So they would definitely be better off due to that. But they couldn't use their own currencies inside of the unit ecosystem. Governance going on. Governance of unit ecosystem structured as a decentralized autonomous organization or DAO can be substantially enhanced by cooperation with an international intergovernmental organization or quote IIO unquote endowed with international legal personality as governed by the current intergovernmental agreement and the 1980 Budapest Convention. Such an IIO may act as the custodian for the decentralized autonomous organization that underpins the unit ecosystem. So there's going to be a governor of this system. Okay, it's going to be an organization which has the character of an IGO, an international intergovernment uh, 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 organization, as governed by an international convention. And that IIO is going to act as the custodian for the decentralized autonomous organization that underpins the ecosystem, okay, of the unit. So there's going to be a supervisor basically for the rule book, okay, and for rules. Not quite a governor, won't have the power of a government. It will be there to safeguard the decentralized character of the system. Research conducted over several years arrived at the conclusion while the global economy functioned and expanded over several decades by relying on a single global currency for its trade, borrowing, and investment needs, fundamental flaws of the post-Bretton Woods system have never been adequately addressed. The recent politically driven explosion in local currency usage for bilateral trade, while aiming to reduce reliance on a single global currency, highlights a host of old problems, as most of the currencies used in these transactions are subject to capital controls. These currencies typically have limited circulation outside of their home countries, and suffer from lack of liquidity, convertibility, and legal clarity on how and where they can be productively invested abroad. Now, that is undoubtedly true. But, okay, the unit is going to have limited circulation also because it's going to be hard to produce new units, okay, at the nodes because of the constraint, okay, of gold, and because of another constraint we'll get to in a very short time. But gold will constrain the amount of currency that can be issued to trade with. If you had a contrasting system where every nation was a monetary sovereign, then each nation would be free to issue and use as much of their currencies in international trade, okay, as they liked. And these currencies might not have limited circulation outside of their home countries and might not suffer from a lack of liquidity, convertibility, and legal clarity. Going on, the geopolitical paradigm shift underway presently highlights inherent vulnerabilities and conflicts of interest to the current system and leads to a search for an alternative global currency that could be introduced into existing financial infrastructure with minimal disruption, a quote, drop-in alternative, unquote. We are the opinion that none of the countries whose currencies could potentially take on this role are able or willing to allow their currency to become a viable alternative global currency for a number of well-founded reasons. At the same time, given the present divergence of political and economic interests, consistent and sustainable global policy coordination among trading countries remains difficult to achieve. Consequently, the primary purpose of the unit as a new alternative global currency is to make global trade and capital flows more resistant to external interference, to serve as apolitical money. This again is in reaction to the interference in the flows of the US dollars, particularly by the United States, but more generally by the collective West, in the way of putting economic sanctions on various countries and making, specifically politicizing the dollar system. Such interference can be applied via various channels, such as payment and settlement systems, like the SWIFT system, denying the use of the SWIFT system to some countries, custody network, supranational loans, or even denomination of the major commodity contracts. The approaching introduction of central bank digital currency, CDBC, makes the search for such a resilient solution even more urgent because, of course, the CDBCs would be particularly subject, okay, to politicization. That's the implication here. The secondary purpose of the unit is to create a viable alternative for storage of value that would provide long-term purchasing power stability. And of course, it's thought that because gold is so prominent in this new system they're proposing, that this would provide long-term purchasing power stability for the unit. Of course, there might be many nations that would not have many units. And while that, and so they might have purchasing power stability, but they might have very little purchasing power, mightn't they? The underlying financial framework and basic technical design we outline in this document do not require cooperation of individual countries. The unit can be used as a drop-in global currency alternative within existing infrastructure, and by extension allows for such essentials as convenient and widely adopted electronic payment and information dissemination systems, trade, finance, the credit origination, and fractional reserve banking. And that raises, another question. It's generally recognized that by the MMT approach that but given the absence of loanable funds market, that there's really no such thing as fractional reserve banking inside of monetarily sovereign states. That fractional reserve banking no longer exists and no longer happens. The authors of this system don't seem to realize that and do seem to think that fractional reserve banking is some sort of advantage that should be built into their system. That would not be an advantage from an MMT point of view. When countries are monetary sovereigns, they don't need to do fractional reserve banking, at all. While addressing the fundamental problem of trust within the global financial system and protecting financial sovereignty of the ecosystem participants from political interference. So again, there's that emphasis on this currency being non-political, not being subject to manipulation by the nations of the world. Then there's the fractal monetary design. I'm not going to discuss that much, but important point is new nodes can be created and by consensus among the existing nodes in the fractal network, and each new node contains a scaled replica of the whole. Each node of the fractal network is a scaled down replica of the whole. The integrity of such a fractal network is preserved by a blockchain-based synchronization and rebalancing the mechanism that uses a variant of the Byzantine fault tolerance-based proofs of stake consensus protocol. I have to admit I'm not sure what that is, but it is generally agreed that blockchain systems and synchronization through the use of blockchain is a very secure way of going about things, though in earlier years, sometimes the blockchain systems that underlie cryptocurrencies were successfully hacked. Going further, though, the unique feature of the proposed decentralized monetary system is the anchoring of values of each component of the reserve basket to gold. The composition and pricing of the underlying basket is defined and measured in terms of gold. So question, does this mean we'd be back on the gold standard for international trading? At least vis-a-vis the United States, that would represent a decline in the monetary sovereignty of the United States. We closed the gold window in 1971 during the Nixon administration. Why did we do that? Because there could be a constraint on our spending that would be placed by foreign nations that were demanding convertibility of their dollars to gold. That's why we closed that gold window and went fully off the gold standard. Would we and other countries that are fully off the gold standard want once again to go back on a version of the gold standard going forward? We define the fractal unit, quote, the unit token is a fungible monetary transactional unit of the unit ecosystem, representing a share of the total unit reserve basket consisting of 40% gold and fiat currencies freely convertible into gold. So that's the other constraint that I was mentioning there. Even the 60% that is not gold is freely convertible to gold. So the countries being part of the market basket would have to make their fiat currencies freely convertible to gold. They would have to open up a gold window in order to trade. Why would they do that and restrict their freedom to issue currencies for international trade? Why would they do that? A self-similar basket is present at each node of the fractal network, while the value of assets at all nodes adds up to the total value of the unit reserve basket, all measured in gold. Well, all I have to say to that is congratulations. So what? New unit tokens can be minted at the unit node level without the need for a central emitting authority or coordination among the issuers of underlying currencies. Further, new unit nodes can be launched in new jurisdictions with relative ease. So here I have to ask a question. Why not have every nation in the international system have its own currency that it can issue, without limit? But why not have the system operate according to certain rules, such as restricting the ability of nations to borrow from other nations in the currencies of those nations? And why not have all nations that come into the system agree that they would allow their currencies to float on international exchanges and allow the value of their currencies in international exchanges to be set by the international currency market? What would be wrong with that? Why would that restrict the sovereignty? Why would that restrict the sovereignty, of individual nations? Now, I'm certainly against, the politicization of international trading currencies. But why would that kind of system necessarily be, a politicized one? Because I see that as the alternative to a system like, the unit system. I don't see why, with the power of computers these days, it would be impractical for nations to trade with each other, in their own currencies. In other words, if you want to buy some of my goods, you have to pay me, in my currency. And I have to pay you, in your currency. Why wouldn't that be a good rule for the system, and one that would work well over a period of time? Emission of new unit tokens is made by exchanging a scaled replica of the unit reserve basket for new unit tokens and sharing the updated number of emitted unit tokens with the rest of the fractal monetary ecosystem and general public. Owning a share of the unit reserve basket at the unit node level is identical to owning a share of a scale basket at the unit ecosystem level. In the unit basket composition, there are no permanently fixed ratios for the underlying components, with the exception of two conditions stipulated in the unit rulebook and tested at the moment of emission of additional unit tokens: the gold content, 40% requirement, and the maximum value, 30% requirement for any other component of the basket valued, in gold. So in other words, let's assume this is a market basket of other fiat currencies. They may be fiat currencies, but they would not be currencies for monetarily sovereign nations, of course, because those fiat currencies would have to be convertible for gold. And that's a restriction on monetary sovereignty. Okay, but the point is, the system doesn't want to have the currency of a single nation, say China, be 30% of the value, of the market basket, of currencies. Okay. So that's what the restriction is. Or if you like, that, for example, would be 30% of the value, of the market basket, but not simply the dollar itself, the dollar as valued in gold. In other words, the dollar as a proxy for gold. New unit tokens can be minted as needed at any time upon delivery of the underlying components of the unit node. Composition and pricing of each component of the basket, but measured in gold, is transparent and public. This approach minimizes costs related to holding and moving a significant physical gold inventory, as modeled by Black. We extend Black's analysis further by removing the assumption that gold is valued in terms of something other than gold itself. So gold is the foundation of the system. All the other things, the value of all the other things is anchored in gold. And the fractal design provides the following immediate benefits for participants of the unit system: transformation of the relatively liquid components, local currencies, into a liquid and transparently priced whole via emission of new unit tokens in exchange for the underlying components. But why would the liquidity present in the unit token system be greater than the liquidity provided in local currencies? Especially if the local currencies were the local currencies of sovereign nations whose ability to issue more, of the local currencies. Why would their liquidity be inferior to liquidity in a system where gold is constraining the issuance of new tokens? I don't know. They'll have to explain that to me. Re-anchoring of price discovery and price formation to gold away from using any national currency, as a reference point. Again, I don't see why re-anchoring price discovery and price formation to gold would be preferable. Historically, we have had anchors to gold. And we have also had periodically serious depressions, in part because of liquidity crises and for other reasons, such as there not being enough currency to go around. The minimization or complete elimination of the need to rebalance gold holdings, reducing operational risk and cost to participants. Gold remains within the jurisdiction of the emitting unit node. So everybody would keep their own physical gold. So this is great if you need to have gold in the system. But why have gold in the system at all? Well, I know why various nations have been acquiring gold, of late, because they're subject to the illusion that gold will always be worth something and that the value of gold is always going up. Well, it's true, the value of gold, is going up for, a variety of reasons. But that doesn't mean its usefulness as a currency, is going up, as we will see later from this own white paper. Anyway, let us go on. Six, the system offers a feasible workaround for the impossible trinity, or the Mundell-Fleming trilemma, as the unit ecosystem does not force any participating governments to abandon their monetary policies, no matter how restrictive. The question is, does the system force any participating governments to abandon their monetary policies, no matter how expansive those monetary policies are? And does the unit ecosystem, does it provide support for government that want to follow expansive fiscal policies in response to business cycles? Going on, if a local currency is used to pay for imports, by definition, it already is at least partially convertible. Yes, but not necessarily to gold. Any and all constraints and conditions placed on this currency will be captured by its price expressed in gold. Yes, but will any expanded policy space inherent in the local currency be captured by its price expressed in gold? It says as long as the price discovery mechanism is reliable. What if the price discovery mechanism is not afforded by a free market? What if the price discovery mechanism for the system is not that of an absolutely free market? Another question to be answered. In the next section, we discuss this important point in more detail. For now, we note that this partial currency convertibility is not incompatible with capital account controls, as the local currency used to pay for imports is typically constrained from freely entering the domestic money supply. Well, it would be interesting to know the constraints. Preservation of national sovereignty and independent monetary policies of the countries whose central banks can employ policies most beneficial to domestic growth and price stability. It's not all about banks employing policies for domestic growth and price stability. It's also about governmental policy, governmental fiscal policy most beneficial to domestic growth and price stability. Why is this system so biased towards what happens with respect to monetary policy? This sounds like a system to me that is steeped in capitalist banking practices. It seems to me to have a capitalist bias. I don't understand why the Chinese, in particular, seem interested in this kind of system. Going forward, the unit ecosystem reduces pressure for interest rate convergence among participating countries, or indeed any additional restrictions on monetary policy. This is contrary to the situation that emerges when other countries' currencies are used for trade. The local central banks in those circumstances are under pressure to align their interest rate policies with the policies of the country's trading partners or competitors. This also stands in contrast to, for example, a scenario modeled by Benigno, or Benigno, it's probably pronounced. Such involvement is possible due to point 4 above. Let's go back to point 4 and refresh our memories about that. A mitigation of practical and legal constraints for new unit node creation within sovereign borders. In particular, it removes the key hurdle for national and sovereign and national institutions to join the ecosystem, as there is no requirement for gold, which might be part of foreign exchange reserves of a nation state to be sent abroad. So this is all about creating new nodes based in gold on one's physical territory. Such improvement is possible due to point 4 above. The fractal monetary system does not create a direct feedback mechanism to the national monetary policies of the countries issuing underlying local currencies, which are included in the unit reserve basket. Okay. I beg to differ about that, because if the fiat currencies that are in the reserve basket are required to be convertible to gold, that definitely provides a direct feedback mechanism to the national monetary policies of the countries issuing the underlying local currencies, because those nations would now be constrained by the necessity to make their fiat currencies convertible to gold. It would destroy their monetary sovereignty. So, in other words, you couldn't have any monetary sovereigns that are part of this particular ecosystem. As the exchange rates are not fixed to gold or any other currencies, currencies in the unit basket will not see an increase in the impossible trinity pressures. Well, that may be true as long as the exchange rates are allowed to freely float in the system, but that would have to be a rule in the system. It cannot be allowed that nations would fix their currency exchange rates by pegging them to the exchange rates of other nations. That could no longer be allowed in that kind of system, which is okay, but I'm just saying That would be a constraint that would have to be put into the system. Outline of the basic unit framework. I do want to see what's going on here, because I might postpone the rest of this until next week. But before I do that, let me check to see what's going on with D tonight. Oh, D doesn't have a 9 p.m. show tonight. I hadn't realized that until now. So that means that I can go on with this exposition and probably finish it, okay, tonight, which I am very much desirous of doing. So basically, I have another hour, which should be enough to finish this. I see I'm roughly halfway through. So let's get to the outline of the basic unit framework. Unit is the currency within a decentralized monetary fractal ecosystem. For convenience, why don't we say here, maybe it'd make things more familiar if I say, if this system is adopted by BRICS, then maybe it would be more friendly to say that the BRIC is the currency within a decentralized monetary fractal ecosystem. This ecosystem is capable of seamlessly increasing its capacity and usability by adding nodes in various jurisdictions. Yes, it could increase its capacity, okay, and usability, as long as new nodes would be, as long as new units, as long as new BRICS were being created by those nodes. The core element of the ecosystem is a unit node defined as an online entity linked to a physical offline hub containing a proportionally identical basket of assets, including gold and local currencies, that follows governance principles set in the unit rulebook. New unit nodes can be added by consensus among the existing unit nodes, whereby each new unit node shall contain a proportional replica of the unit reserve basket sufficient to mint a minimal quantity of unit tokens set by the unit rulebook. So each nation would be able to mint a minimal quantity of unit tokens. In other words, a minimal quantity of BRICS. Each one of the nodes would have currency issuing power. Have to point out here, the nodes are not simply nation states. They might be banks. They might be currency marketplaces. They might be mercantile, okay, exchange. As is said here, there would be addition of other elements added to the unit ecosystem, the BRIC ecosystem, as it matures. These may include, depending on user demand and priorities, the precious metals, currency and mercantile exchanges, as well as capital stock exchanges. These additional elements might in due course facilitate the direct use of unit tokens, in other words, the direct use of BRICS currency in price discovery and payment for global trade, as well as in capital market transactions. The unit ecosystem enables unconstrained economic transactions between all participants in fungible unit tokens, in fungible bricks, in other words, whose value is measured in gold and which can be used for price discovery for trade, services, and capital transactions, payments via any open payment system, or interbank transfers just in any other currency. We propose the code UNT, including blockchain-based payment systems or the dedicated unit payment system. Unit node validation protocol, which will refer to minted unit tokens as part of the staking process. Fractal decentralized ecosystem governance as unit nodes will vote on proposals suggested by the IIO for optimization of resource allocation and development of the unit system. The IIO may act as a nonprofit auditing body based on the principles of international law and is not governed by any national monetary regulatory authority in order to achieve transparency, and wide adoption. The unit ecosystem requires a regular audit of unit nodes where users may store physical gold that's used within the ecosystem. IIO will govern and oversee the audit process, set development direction, and propose changes to the unit rulebook that may be required as the ecosystem evolves. Suitability of the unit ecosystem requires the following conditions: transparent price discovery mechanism of each component of the unit reserve basket in gold terms. I think transparent price discovery mechanism means a market. In other words, there has to be a market for each component of the unit reserve basket. And gold has to figure in that market so we can see the price of the various assets in that market as they're relative to gold. It is preferable to have multiple inputs for each price, as pricing in different venues may be affected by the differences in local regulatory regime, logistics cost, and availability of supporting infrastructure. So there is an impact of local regulatory regime, logistic costs, and supporting infrastructure on the price of the components of the reserve basket. Those nations that have regulatory regimes that are robust would be priced differently in gold terms. Would local regulatory regimes that are pretty strict be worth less in gold or worth more in gold? How would the infrastructure be priced in gold? Is there any bias to the currency due to these kinds of impacts, so that certain nations have currencies that are more valuable because of their regulatory regimes, their logistic costs, and their supporting infrastructure? 2, distributed secure gold storage, which may or may not directly link to the price discovery venues. As new unit tokens are minted, incremental gold that is deposited to the unit nodes will be distributed across the secure storage in order to minimize operational risks. Since they're using gold, of course, they have to worry about secure storage. There's still physical costs that are incurred in this system that don't exist in fiat monetary systems. 3, unit nodes serving as custodians by accepting replicas of the unit reserve basket and minting new unit tokens in exchange. They ideally will be located in favorable jurisdictions and linked to a physical offline hub with adequate transport connections and supporting infrastructure. Unit nodes publicly broadcast unit basket composition and number of minted unit tokens, protecting the integrity of the network and enabling transparent pricing of unit tokens. So at this point, I think I've said enough to indicate that the monetary sovereignties of individual nations for trading would be circumscribed somewhat by nations submitting themselves to the unit system. They would no longer be capable of having their own currencies be a part of the market baskets unless they allowed their currencies to be convertible to gold. That would limit the monetary sovereignty of the participating nations. There's no two ways about it. The key integrity enforcement mechanism of the unit ecosystem is the supermajority vote by the nodes in proportion to the value of unit tokens previously minted by each node. Any needed changes in rules and regulations compiled in the Unit Governance Rulebook proposed by the IIO, as well as the evolution of the unit reserve basket, can be introduced and enforced in the future by this consensus building mechanism. So, the IIO is a consensus building mechanism. What if the IIO turns out not to be a consensus building mechanism? What ensures that it will be a consensus building mechanism rather than a conflict building mechanism? What ensures that? Very little here is being said about the IIO. What about the unit basket composition? We note that if two willing parties are transacting across borders in a local currency, and if imported goods are exchanged for this, quote, offshore currency, that is an offshore currency in OFC, is domestic currency used to pay for imports. There exists an effective value of the OFC that makes such a trade economically attractive for both parties. Now, but the effective value may not have anything to do with currencies or gold. Going on. While the benefits for importers in this case are obvious, exporters are only compensated fairly if they can further use the OFC in trading with third parties at a market clearing value of the OFC that is not directly related to the original transaction. So, for example, let's say Russia did a deal with India to send its oil to India in return for rupees. Then exporters, Russia say, would only be compensated fairly if they can further use the rupees in trading with third parties at a market clearing value of the rupee that is not directly related to the original transaction. Well, that certainly might be possible because India might be able to use its rupees in currency trading with the United States, perhaps, or currency trading with other nations that want goods from India. But of course, India would have to insist on payment in rupees in order to make the rupees that Russia got actually be useful.
What about precious metals? Other precious metals?
Well, those can be part of the market
Uranium.
basket too.
Uranium?
Those can be part of the market basket too. I don't see any restrictions. I don't see any restrictions in this proposal as to what is part of the market basket.
Mhm.
But certainly, local currencies, local fiat currencies, are envisioned as part of the market basket. Gold is 40% of the market basket, but the other 60% is other assets. The market clearing value can materially diverge from the official exchange rate set by local authorities, especially in the presence of capital controls or other restrictions on the capital account. We posit that an efficient method for finding a consistently reliable market clearing value of offshore currencies is to create a mechanism for transparent and free price discovery of offshore currency value in gold terms. Such clearing levels measured in spot gold correspond to the values that makes it economically attractive for an exporter to receive offshore currencies in exchange for its exports and subsequently trade with third parties using the foreign offshore currency that was obtained. This clearing level will reflect any and all practical and legal uncertainties that may apply in each individual case and will be objectively captured by the amount of gold that can be purchased at any time in exchange for offshore currency from parties not related to the original export-import transaction. I'm not sure what to say about that. I don't, immediately see any problem with it. We know, for example, that the dollar has a value in terms of gold right now. What is it? Is it now $3,000 an ounce? So, so what? In other words, consequently, each unit token is a share of the unit reserve basket of assets, which is created and evolves according to the following simple rules. All items in the unit reserve basket must be freely tradable in gold terms for spot delivery at one of the unit nodes. If the condition of free price discovery in gold terms is not satisfied, the currency cannot be deemed suitable for the unit reserve basket. Well, if it's an offshore currency, does it have to be suitable for the unit reserve basket? I'm talking about if there is a nation that's a part of the unit system, that's a part of the BRICS system, and it wants to do a deal with another nation that is not a part of the BRICS system, and it is willing to pay in the offshore currency for that. Then that currency cannot be deemed suitable for the unit reserve basket. But why does that stop the member of BRICS from still trading in that currency if the exporter to the BRICS nation insists on trading in that currency? So I'm not sure what the significance of that is. I would suppose that the people formulating this system are not trying to create any circumstances where the nations that are not part of the system cannot trade with nations that are part of the system. It seems to me that would create barriers to trade that would not be advantageous to the BRICS nations and would tend to force other nations to join BRICS. And I don't think that's the philosophy of BRICS, to force other nations. They want to provide other nations with incentives to join BRICS. But my understanding is that they're not in the business of trying to force other nations to become a part of their bloc. Going further, the gold content of the unit reserve basket as a share of the total value in gold terms, which is required for emission of a new unit token, equals 40%. The value of any non-gold component of the unit reserve basket delivered for minting of a new unit token must not exceed 30% of the total measured in gold terms. Well, we went over that rule before. The exact composition of the unit reserve basket at any time is public knowledge and is broadcast by all the notes. The purpose of these rules is to preserve stability and continuity of prices expressed in unit tokens, to remove uncertainty from the unit tokens and unit node creation, and to allow for long-term flexibility that may be required due to changes in policies, liquidities, or geopolitical realities. Now we get to an interesting part. There is plenty of analysis and historical evidence perhaps demonstrating why a currency fully backed or even dominated by gold would not serve well as money. Perhaps the best intuitive explanation of why gold should not dominate the fractal financial system is the one by Hayek, Friedrich von Hayek, Austrian economist. Usually gold is very favored by Austrian economists, who noted that, quote, I do believe that if today all the legal obstacles were removed which prevent an issue of private money, people would, from their own experience, be led to rush for the only thing they know and understand and start using gold. But this very fact would, after a while, make it very doubtful whether gold was, for the purpose of money, really a good standard. It would turn out to be a very good investment for the reason that because of the increased demand for gold, the value of gold would go up. But that very fact would make it very unsuitable as money. If they, people, were free to choose the money in terms of which they kept their books, made their calculations, incurred debts, or lent money, they would prefer a standard which remains stable in purchasing power, in terms which it is equally likely that the price of any commodity picked out at random will rise as that it will fall. Such a stable standard reduces the risk of unforeseen changes in the prices of particular commodities to a minimum, because with such a standard, it is just as likely that any one commodity will rise in price or will fall in price, unquote. So, to maximize the utility of the fractal unit as money, following Hayek's logic, the value of units should not be dominated by gold, just anchored by it. So now the immediate question is, what's the difference between being dominated by gold or just anchored by it? Gold for the fractal unit provides the function of an outside money anchor, as the term is used by Passar and was originally defined by Gurley and Shaw. Okay. We describe the basket rebalancing mechanism in the next section, which proposes a practical implementation of this principle. I'm having trouble seeing the difference between dominated by gold and anchored by it. I understand that everything has to be measured, the value of everything has to be measured in terms of gold. The value of the other fiat currencies that are part of the basket have to be measured in terms of gold. So isn't this a system that is dominated by gold? Why not? The best argument for why 40% is the appropriate share of gold for the fractal monetary system perhaps comes from Mr. Wexler, Vice President of the Whitney Central Bank of New Orleans, who in 1913 hearings before the Committee on Banking and Currency at the U.S. Senate noted in the context of the gold banking Federal Reserve note, quote, the U.S. were still on the gold standard at the time. I think 33% would be sufficient, yes. We have suggested that there should be 40%. We've raised it from 33% to 40% because we believe that it would be better to make the notes so absolutely good, the brick so absolutely good, the unit so absolutely good and impregnable, that we would rather err on the side of too much reserve than too little reserve. Haig's condition of long-term purchasing power capability would remain satisfied even if one of the currencies in the basket were to increase in value and liquidity due to, for example, a wider international adoption for trade, as its dominance would be checked by the 30% value limit in the unit reserve basket. Well, that's debatable, I guess. I mean, what if a number of the currencies were to increase in value and liquidity due to wider international adoption for trade? Basket rebalancing. Other things being equal, emission of new unit tokens does not create a requirement to rebalance the unit reserve basket. This is due to the fact that if all four conditions for emission of new unit tokens mentioned previously are satisfied, new unit tokens, that is new currency, are minted in exchange for an exact replica of the unit reserve basket at that time. A need for unit reserve basket rebalancing may arise if, due to the relative moves in value of the underlying components in gold terms, minting new unit tokens by accepting a replica of the unit reserve basket would constitute a violation of conditions 2 or 3 as presented in the section above. Well, let's go back to 2 or 3. 2. The gold component of the unit reserve basket is the share of total value which is required for emission of a new unit token equals 40%. So if the gold content based on the issuance of new tokens would cause things to fall below 40%, that would be a violation. Or if the value of any non-gold component were to exceed 30%, then that also has to be corrected for. We describe the basket rebalancing mechanism in the next section, which proposes a practical implementation of this principle. So we've been through that basket rebalancing. To minimize costs and maximize resilience, there is no requirement for gold bullion to be rebalanced among unit nodes at all. Instead, rebalancing is done by adjusting the local currency portion of the unit reserve basket, the non-gold part of the basket, the NGP, if needed. As all components of the unit reserve basket are valued in gold terms, risk of arbitrage between outstanding and newly minted tokens is mitigated by keeping the gold equivalent value of newly minted unit tokens identical to the value of outstanding unit tokens and redistributing international incremental changes to the non-gold part across unit nodes as needed in order to re-equalize proportions in the change basket among the nodes of the fractal monetary system. Basket rebalancing scenarios fall into two categories: condition 2 violations, condition 3 violations. In a condition 2 violation scenario, the value of NGP in the deliverable basket deviates from 60% of the total in gold terms. Minting new unit tokens in the case would require the basket delivered in exchange for emission of new unit tokens to contain exactly 40% of gold, while the value of NGP required would be reduced or increased while preserving the relative weights of components of the unit reserve basket at that time to equal exactly 60% of the total delivered basket measured in gold terms. That seems awfully strict. In condition 3 violation scenario, value of one of the local currencies exceeds 30% of the unit reserve basket. Minting new unit tokens in this scenario will require a smaller proportional share of the currency in question, in the NGP of the deliverable basket, compensated for by the increase in value of other NGP components measured in gold terms. In both scenarios, therefore, the share of gold in the basket to be delivered in exchange for new unit tokens will equal 40% of total value, and the share of the NGPs would remain fixed at 60%. In both scenarios, the need for rebalancing is conditional on minting new unit tokens only, and is implemented by redistributing incremental changes to the NGP in order to equalize the proportional composition of assets at each unit node. Importantly, there is no ongoing requirement for any rebalancing among the unit nodes beyond the new unit token emission. Composition of the unit reserve basket remains unchanged after the emission, regardless of relative price moves of the unit reserve basket components, unless new unit tokens are minted subsequently. This approach facilitates price discovery at the unit level directly, driven by supply and demand for unit tokens rather than some reference values. This design also reduces costs, operational risks, as well as the attack surface of the fractal monetary system. So, in other words, put much more simply, if you have price discovery at the unit level directly, driven by supply and demand for unit tokens, there's no need for any outside reference values. Once you start this process, supply and demand takes care of the rebalancing. Internodal arbitrage risk is eliminated by keeping the composition of underlying assets synchronized at each node after each new unit token is minted. The risk of arbitrage between unit tokens already in circulation versus newly minted unit tokens is mitigated by the requirement to deliver the exact replica of the unit reserve basket in exchange for new unit tokens, or by the rebalancing protocol outlined above in case rebalancing conditions are triggered at the time of the emission. Due to the variation in liquidity, arbitrage of unit tokens versus unit reserve basket components will remain possible. Arbitrage activity of this kind would be a welcome part of the ecosystem, as it would improve the liquidity and price discovery for all participants. Incentives. We expect various economic agents to join the unit ecosystem driven by different incentives. The most urgent need may be for exporters who may have accumulated large positions in local currencies as a result of bilateral trade. At the same time, importing countries may be looking for ways to potentially sterilize the currency used to pay for imports and minimize the risk of this currency re-entering the domestic money supply in a disruptive fashion. Using UNT tokens allows both exporters and importers to balance their interests. Further, governments on both sides of cross-border trade might consider collecting export and import taxes and levies in the currency that can be used to finance trade and reserves, generating a revenue stream denominated in unit tokens. In other words, the governments would have to should generate a revenue stream that, say, was denominated in BRICS. Critically, if the BRIC were the unit token. Critically, unit tokens represent an attractive alternative to using other currencies, domestic currency for trade, investment, and reserves. The unit ecosystem offers its members the following further advantages: decentralization, trade and financial flows shared by a large number of participants, inclusivity. The unit ecosystem is open for all participants. Efficacy, transaction costs, infrastructure requirements, and the speed of clearing settlement would be comparable to or better than bilateral trade in local or global currencies. That remains to be seen, of course. Transparency, clear rules and procedures monitored and enforced by a reputable international organization, the IIO, right? Fairness, impossibility of asymmetrical information or asymmetrical advantages within the ecosystem, security, focus on cyber and physical safety of assets and information, sustainability. The unit ecosystem is designed for resilience when facing economic and political disruptions, as well as attacks by third parties. The fully developed unit ecosystem should be able to survive an abrupt loss of any of its nodes, while disruptions related to the currency components in the unit reserve basket are relatively easy to mitigate. A loss of a material part of the gold which anchors the underlying basket may jeopardize the integrity of the system. Distributed storage across multiple secure locations may be a part of the solution, but it would likely need to be augmented by a portion of unit tokens held in reserve, funded by interest income on local currencies forming the unit reserve basket. I'm not sure I fully understand the implications of that particular package, so of those particular paragraphs. So I'm going to pass on that. Have to think about that. Okay, some more. In order to accelerate the buildup of such reserves at the ecosystem level, the emission of new unit tokens may incur a small additional fee to cover the infrastructure costs of the system. As liquidity and resilience of the system increases, these fees are likely to materially decline. So there's a little mystery at the end. The conclusion is very short, very short. It doesn't really summarize at all. It says, we propose a solution to the alternative global currency problem by introducing an independent, decentralized, fractal monetary framework which avoids using national currencies for international trade and reserves. Each unit token represents a proportional share of the basket of underlying assets containing gold and local currencies. New transactional units can be minted at the node level without the need for a central emitting authority or coordination among the issuers of underlying currency by exchanging a replica of the basket for new unit tokens. So these replicas, the requirement for submitting a replica of the basket in order to issue the new tokens, that's what introduces the controls into the system. With further resilience enhancements, the unit ecosystem may reach a level of robustness sufficient to continue functioning in scenarios of extreme disruptions and conflicts. Well, there are a lot of open questions about this. It merits lots and lots of discussion if there's going to be serious consideration of it. For the BRICS, I've already stated what my preference is from the MMT point of view. And I think that preference is that in international trade, that all we should have is local currencies from local monetary sovereigns, that all nations should become actual monetary sovereigns, and any international system of trading should enable all of the units of the system of trade to be monetary sovereigns and to fulfill the requirements of monetary sovereignty. In that instance, then all of the participants could benefit from international trade, as long as, from my point of view, the participants follow an international trading policy which conforms to the public purpose of each of the nations. In other words, a system of monetary sovereigns all spending for public purpose internally to their nations and trading for public purpose within the international system. That would probably be the system that would be best for all. The question arises, how could conflicts in public purpose among the various countries, how could those conflicts be resolved? Because public purpose conceptions in each of the individual nations are certainly going to be different, and more than occasionally you're going to come into conflict. So what is the mechanism of arbitrage or resolving conflicts, in this instance? And I believe this is where the United Nations and international law come in, that they need to be the resolutions for international conflict that we respect and make use of. And over a period of time, hopefully, if we do that, the possibilities of war will decrease exponentially, and nations will not turn to war to try to resolve the kinds of conflicts that arise from imbalances, in trade. So that's all I have to say tonight, about this. I'll summarize by saying that from an MMT framework point of view, as I interpret it, and I'm only one of the people who tries to reason in terms of the MMT framework and to apply that framework. It is fundamental to that framework for economics to be used for the public purpose, and for trade, to be used, for the public purpose. From the MMT point of view, that requires that nations be monetary sovereigns or be progressing towards monetary sovereignty, at least from my point of view. This system, the unit fractal system, undermines the monetary sovereignty. If it were imposed, let's say, on all nations tomorrow, it would deprive a considerable portion of the world's nations of the monetary sovereignty of those nations, because it would make all of the nations subject to gold, to the exigencies of trading for gold, once again to the exigencies of finding gold, or the exigencies of learning how to produce gold in varied ways. So what I'd say is, from the get-go, in terms of the fundamentals of this particular system, it is in conflict with the MMT framework. And because of that, I have to say that I think it will fail, because it will deprive some of the nations who enter the fractal network of the monetary sovereignty they need to cope with their business cycles and their economic policies, to fashion those so that they fulfill the public purpose, of their nations. So that's my initial comment on that. I freely admit I have much more to understand about this particular system. It will be important to understand this system or systems like this, because if the BRICS nations are moving towards this, that is very important. because by all accounts, there are 40 more nations trying to enter the BRICS right now. Once that happens, most of the world's population will be members of the BRICS. If they decide to make use of a new BRICS trading system that uses the unit conception, that has to affect the international trading possibilities of the nations that remain outside of that system. And if no nations decide to remain outside of that system, then that means all the nations of the world will be giving up their monetary sovereignty in order to participate in this particular system. And I think in the long run, that would prove to be a disaster. It would again expose nations to extreme depressions from time to time, in spite of the fact that this only has to do with trading currency, remember. So the domestic systems could still be monetarily sovereign. But I think the effects of trade cannot be completely isolated from internal conditions in various countries. If there's a collapse in the international trading system due to liquidity problems or due to conflicts in the international trading systems, that is going to impact supply chains and prices in the international domestic systems. There's no getting around that. If the monetary sovereignty of nations is limited only to domestic affairs, that's going to create foreign policy problems for those nations. As reliance on gold for international trade until 1971 created problems for nations. So I'm going to leave it there and go to your comments. That's what I have to say tonight for this. And right now, I want to go to your comments. And see if there are any. Well, I did get, some people did eventually join this stream. I think the low attendance is highly remarkable. I don't know exactly how to account for it. I had good attendance for the last number of shows. I never fell as low as 4 people in those shows. Steve Wolfbrandt was here. Andy says, "Hi, Joepedia, just got free. Why does it have to be gold? Aren't there more valuable metals like coltan, francium, silicon, okay, etc.? Okay. Is silicon a metal? I wasn't aware silicon was a metal. Anyway, yeah, there are more valuable metals, but it's not a question of it's having to be gold. Okay, it's a question of the people proposing the unit framework, setting on gold as the anchor for the framework. One could suggest other systems that would use another metal, okay, as the anchor for a framework. For example, titanium. I don't know. Okay, I don't believe in anchors for currency frameworks. I believe in fiat currencies and allowing the value of fiat currencies to float, okay, in international trade. I think that is the best system. Okay, as I've said, I think it's it's a step backward to anchor currencies in gold, okay, or any other metal. It restricts the monetary sovereignty of nations engaged, okay, in the system. So I don't want even trading currencies to have that kind of anchor. So Andy says, hi, friends. Andy says, water is going to be more valuable than everything the way the climate emergency is whooping us this year already, and will continue to whoop us every year going forward. Would this currency be for using among BRICS nations only, or would it be used for other nations not in BRICS? Sorry, got here late. Let's just go back to calorie beads. It would not only be used by BRICS nations. In other words, the system once constructed, I think, would be open to all nations who wanted to get involved in this particular system. And he says, who can afford gold? Eggs are just expensive. LOL. Sorry about the silicon. I meant rare stuff. Andy Kane says, yeah, such as, for example, say lithium, rare stuff. And he says, I like the fiat system because you're not limited to stuff that's to get, that's hard to get. The reason why I like the fiat system, because like it or not, the fiat systems are really anchored in the economic systems of the various fiat currency nations. The value of their currencies is ultimately anchored in the real productivity of those nations. That's why, it's important. And that's why I think I'm going to stick with that. Does anybody have any idea about why the attendance was so low tonight? I'm very surprised by that because the topic is such a hot topic in certain circles. It's really amazing that so few were watching tonight. And that includes on Twitter. It's very strange. I don't understand it at all. Maybe the subject is just too new. Any case, tomorrow night I'll be doing something different. Specifically, what I'll be doing tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, is I'll be discussing the critique of MMT by Matt Taibbi, which was a strange critique from a number of points of view. And I need to discuss also some antics, of Bobby Kennedy again. I call them antics. That's a smear word. I shouldn't be using smear words, but Bobby Kennedy appeared somewhere and made further statements about Israel and Gaza that show that he still is under the influence of certain people who represent a baleful influence on his campaign and the acceptability of Bobby Kennedy as a candidate. So I'll be discussing that. And the third thing I'll be discussing tomorrow night is the news from Oregon, where progressives lost a primary due to huge amounts of money being thrown into the primary. And of course, due to the lack of strength thus far of the Dump the Corruption campaign, because these people were able to defeat, the progressives, because people looked at all the ads that came in and they did not immediately think these ads are coming from big money and they're attacking a particular candidate. That means the other candidates are benefiting from this big money. that means what we have to do is to go and oppose those other candidates who are benefiting from this big money and maybe vote for the candidate that's getting attacked by the big money. That's what you would do if dump the corruption was really being practiced. Because it wasn't practiced in Oregon, okay, the progressive who was running got really slaughtered. And it was solely due to the big money coming into this campaign. So I have to discuss this for a while. So there'll be these three topics, okay, tomorrow. Okay, a further Kennedy screw up, the progressive loss in primaries, and the Matt Taibbi smear, okay, of MMT, which is entertaining, okay, in itself. So hopefully tomorrow night will, on its face, be more entertaining than tonight was, and we will have, therefore, a larger crowd actually coming. So I was glad I had time to finish doing the unit, okay, tonight, because I really did need, the time to finish it. So I was grateful for the extra hour, actually. Glad I could do that because that discussion of the unit is going to be important as time goes on, because the unit is going to be important as time goes on. So that's all I have to say for tonight. I don't know if April is still here. Oh, yeah, she read about AIPAC buying the progressives in Oregon. And God bless you, honey.
Thank you.
And April said maybe because of other streams. Well, there are always other streams. Yeah, but maybe there's some particularly important other stream or particularly important political event that's going on tonight that caused people to stay away. April says, thanks, Joe. It was interesting. I just don't quite get it all yet. I don't get it all yet either. But I hope to be getting the input of Warren Mosler on this pretty soon. And I have a feeling that he's going to instantly get it, instantly be able to say what's wrong with it and produce some great objections to it, which I am very anxious to learn about, okay, from him. So with that, I'm going to say good night. Going to end the stream. We actually had one more person just join. I don't know who that was. Maybe they'll say hello. I see Dee was here for part of the time. But I am going to say goodnight now because I've been here for a couple of hours and I need to do some other things. Thank you, April, for coming and for commenting as usual. And thank you, Steve, and thank you, Dee. If I looked at the comments, I would have known at 8:14 that there was no 9 p.m. show tonight. I wouldn't have had to look it up at 9:02. So that reminds me to look at the comments more often. But anyway, I'm going to end the stream now. And I'll see you tomorrow night with what I talked about. Thanks.